And thank you very much. And I think all the speakers, it was very interesting to get the perspective from so many different countries. Dr. Reddy, I have one question. One is the emphasis on gender is absolutely well taken and it has to be there. But I'd like your views, coming from the background that you're coming from. What concrete suggestions do you have for increasing the empowerment of women and the involvement of women? How do you concretely see women's nutritional status improving, and what are the concrete steps that have to be taken for this? And secondly, there was this thing about the Prime Minister, at that level it has to be made into an urgent issue. What happens when the political class doesn't take an interest? What does the country do? In India, we have a very vibrant, I think what has really happened in India has been that we have a very vibrant civil society groups which are advocating and addressing this issue of nutrition security. And they have really brought it to center stage. And the government has been, the direction has been the other way. The government has been forced to acknowledge the importance of this issue. I'd just like to know whether other countries, they are at all, encouraging civil society groups to take up this issue. Or they have a vibrant movement there as well.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Reddy, do you want to answer?
Firstly, I think there is a larger developmental framework that needs to be accepted and adopted, and that requires action at various levels. But since you asked for some very specific measures that can be undertaken, firstly, the existing programs must be much more effectively implemented with greater outreach and greater impact. But even if you take an issue of what happens to a pregnant woman, it's only the women in the organized sector who are entitled to maternity leave. But in a country with a large unorganized sector presence, what happens to the poor woman who has to actually go in for earning her daily wage? Now in Tamil Nadu, you have the Muthulakshmi Reddyar scheme, in which 3 months prior to delivery and 3 months after delivery, they are given cash supplements so that they can take care of their own nutrition and the nutrition of the child. And now such a scheme is now being proposed at the national level, but not yet been implemented. I think it's time that child care is recognized as work, even in the context of the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. Why is it only laying a road or digging a well is regarded as work, and not looking after a young infant is not regarded as work for compensation? So these are some of the additional coverage that needs to be provided for protecting a pregnant woman and protecting her nutrition and that of the child. But of course, there are a number of other areas of women's empowerment that need to be tackled, including the biases that exist in semi-feudal societies.
Say, oh, it's agricultural issues. Some people say, oh, no, it's public health and income issues. Other, it's water and sanitation issue. In reality, we know that in different countries, the binding constraint may be different. So I want us all to agree that as we leave this room, we never take at face value a statement saying that worldwide this is one or the other or third issue, because that differs. Second comment motivated by what Mr. Aziz said about food prices, that shows even further aspect of cross-sectorality, because food prices call upon social safety net to be built in order to prevent populations when the food prices increase. And that can happen only between crises. And social safety net programs can include conditionality that improve behavior that goes towards better nutritional status. On gender issue, I do have a comment, the final comment, which is maybe not the one expected, which is I talked to people who operated for years in the HIV/AIDS community. And it seems there are many lessons that nutrition community, food security and nutrition community can take from them. But there is one indicator which is interesting, and I was told by a colleague that they told me 10, 12 years ago in panels on HIV/AIDS, some of the panels were all males panels. Now they are always mixed panels. So I hope the panel like that, 5 years down the line, will have 50% of women.
Guilty as charged. Mr. Aziz, I wanted to ask you, this lady asked a very interesting question. What does a country do when there is no high-level political commitment to this particular issue?
I think some answer has come from the floor. First of all is civil society. Then, of course, there are other dimensions of the government which are not at the political level. For example, parliaments can put pressure on the executive to play a role. There are committees parliamentary committees dealing with the subject. And thirdly, I think media is now a very major role. And a television program which shows the impact of malnutrition on women and children and so on and so forth can have a dramatic impact on policy, because that is where you see the government become very sensitive. And so the whole media, when you talk of awareness here, requires a very innovative approach to presenting program, particularly on television, which are very dramatic and therefore can influence policy as well as make other people aware to follow the correct approach. So there is need for not just entertainment and television, but this kind of program.
Exactly. That's the critical advocacy role, like one of the three pillars that Julie was talking about. I'm going to go to you, sir, in a minute, but yes, you, sir, in front.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I would like Dr. Reddy's comments on the impact of genetically modified foods on the level of nutrition. This aspect has got ignored. I'm aware that this is not a real question at the moment in Indian context, but this is going to be a question even in India in view of the research and in view of some of the initiatives which the government has taken. Second, the importance of agriculture, revolutionizing agricultural production and productivity are basic, if not all that is required for nutritional development. But when we talk of revolutionizing agricultural production and productivity, we often forget the institutional aspects. We must be aware the question of malnutrition, hunger, and low nutritional status is lying precisely in those areas and within those communities which have a feudal social background, feudal or semi-feudal status. For instance, India, some of the states which suffer most in this respect are the very areas where permanent settlement and Jamindari system is there, where land reforms are still an unfinished task, even in Pakistan. But yet I often find that this very important question of land relations, land reforms gets neglected in such discussion. The role of the researchers and the intellectuals is very important. Recently, Amartya Sen said, and said it very pointedly, without referring to the Honorable Prime Minister's saying. He said, the most serious question to ask is not whether India has achieved 8.5% to 9% growth, but to ask what is the nutritional status in India. This is Amartya Sen saying. Now if a person like Amartya Sen says this has an impact. And finally, the political class. Now, the gentleman has left, but I appreciate what he said. It's important what the leader of the government thinks and does. Now, this is very important. But how to make this leader say things and do things which we require much depends not only a civil society defined in a very narrow sense of the term, but on social classes moving towards some kind of larger social political movements even. And I would in this context say that those days are not very far off when we are going to witness even food rights if the food prices are not controlled in countries like India, because it's not enough to say that's going to be a global problem. It's not enough to say that this is a secular trend. It's not enough to link it with the rising fuel prices. It's the job of the state to see that such situations are tackled effectively sooner than later before food rights become a case. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good, thank you. Could you, sorry, there's a gentleman at the back who's been very patient, sir. Could you stand up? There's the microphone.
Good afternoon, sirs. I am Diambar from University of Kashmir, Srinagar. It's a very nice discussion which we have been hearing from the panelists regarding this FMC initiative. My question or my observation may call attention of Mr. Saptar Aziz Sir. We know that agriculture is a supplier of the nutrition, and we don't doubt it. But the question is that over a period of time, the contribution of agriculture in the GDP has been declining because there has been a shift taking place from agriculture to industry and to service sector. So unless and until we don't improve the productivity of agriculture, we are going to have any increase in our income, and the result is that mere production of agriculture without its availability and accessibility cannot solve our problems. And the second thing is that we have been discussing so far the role of the governments, we have been discussing the role of the world institutions in solving such problems, but probably we have not been giving enough attention to the civil society reaction to these problems. Now the question is that we have the problem, but let's discuss first problem first. We have in our countries like India and Pakistan the problem of hunger, and then we can move to nutrition. But what I have been observing as a student of economics for the period of time, that a lot of wastage of food has been taking place in India and Pakistan. And it's my observation that I have seen in some of the countries, especially in Saudi Arabia, where very little wastage of food is taking place here. Not only that, but the civil society is contributing in the form of some civil institutions, the donations, which takes care of the people who are the sufferers. But we don't have such things here in our country. So, your reaction. Thank you very much.
Very good, thank you. We have time for one more question, sir. Just, yes.
Very good discussion since morning, but I want to say, because what we are thinking about the issue of nutrition and food insecurities and all these things, we need the institutions, and these institutions should not be a conventional institution. What in the light of the Rawls, Nazik and Amrit Sen, the kinds of institutional structure, restructuring that we are interested in is, wherein the institution ought to be transcendent in the sense that this institution should be being, knowing and doing. Unless and until this element is not captured in such a lofty and very important goals concerned with the humanity, I think we would not be able to achieve anything. The another important thing is this thing, so far as the question of food security, and Amrit Sen has said in his book, Commodity and Capability. And now in that he has pointed out that the aim is not to give the food. Supposing you give the amount of food, or say you bother about the nutrition of this thing. But then if the features of what you give to the person are not meeting with the features of the person, the commodity features should meet with the features of the person. You will not be able to generate capability. And by capability we mean functioning. If this comes, then automatically we would be able to conquer the serious issue like food security or nutrition issues and all these things. So to my mind, this thing should be given a very serious thought. Thank you very much.
Very good, thank you. Are leaving, and we also have other sessions going on. So let me just ask each of the panelists if they would have one or two, perhaps, quick closing comments. Mikhail, can I start with you? You've heard a very interesting discussion here. What are you going to take away from this?
What I'm taking away from this is that we need to be very careful about the language when we talk about challenges of food and nutrition security. What persuades certain professional groups and people would not persuade the others. I saw so diverse perspective of looking at the nutrition issue that I would be more sensitive with respect to avoiding jargon and trying to understand real concerns coming from different sides of the debate. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Dr. Reddy? Your comments.
I believe, as has been pointed out from the floor, that agriculture should not be merely seen as a commercial activity, but as a developmental activity. And that when we are talking about nutrition, we are not only talking about calorically adequate food, but also nutritionally appropriate food. and the goals of agriculture must be geared towards these public health objectives.
Very good, thank you. Tim Wheeler, your closing comment, what you've heard today, and the future of Safansi.
Yes, thank you, Roger. And I'd like maybe to pick up on an earlier answer that I gave, which is each individual, as you leave the room, you have the opportunity to think, how can I be involved? And I think in these difficult challenges that we'll hear a lot about over the next 2 days, it does require the skills of each and every one of us to address food and nutrition security. So leave this room thinking, if I can do anything, what should it be? And if it accords with the Safansi objectives, then here's an opportunity to get involved and make your own contribution to food and nutrition security.
Thank you, Tim. Dr. Pant, you've been very patient as well. Your final comments.
Yes. I think that when we just talk about the food or nutrition or health or the sanitations, only we focus in one sectors. But we have already seen or understood that whenever we say food security or nutrition, the outcome with the nutrition and health actually. So this is the combined effort of all the sectors. I think all the sectors should understand that they should not neglect one sector for the other one. If that one, we will not be achieving our goal. So before leaving this room, we have got to think that all sectors are important and there should be good coordinated effort from the top to bottom. My parting point would be this, that most often, whenever we make a program, they become very good program, but whenever it comes to the community level, for the ultra force, you see, when it goes to trickle down there, so the program, it gets dilated. And those persons who are supposed to get maximum benefit for this, and for whom we are all here gathered, they get very minimum, very less. So whenever you are having a coordinated committee in the top level, in the same intensity, your program should trickle down to the poorest of the poor house. So they get the maximum benefit for this. Then only whatever we have been gathered here will be useful and successful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pant, for that reminder. And finally, Mr. Aziz, your final comments on what you've heard.
Well, I think as briefly mentioned, food and nutrition security has to be pursued within a broader socio-economic framework. And if the development model is inclusive and pro-poor, then obviously not only their participation, but poor will no longer be only recipients, but participant in the development process. Then some of these concerns will automatically be looked after. But in doing so, institutions remain very important. Without that, the role of civil society remains important, and the whole holistic model and gender dimension. So they are all part of that development model. If that is there, then all these interventions we are talking about will automatically flow and benefit. If they are not there, then these interventions will become more and more confined and more difficult to have the desired results.
Very good, thank you. And let me thank the audience for being such a good audience, and I want to thank the gentlemen. I wish I could say something else, but thank you, gentlemen on the panel, for your comments. And I hope you'll all walk out of here with one thought in mind. Think about Safansi and what you can do to help promote these cross-sectoral cooperation linkages that we've been talking about. Thank you very much.
Yes, indeed.
It was a pleasure to meet you. Great Nice to meet you. We'll be there for a few days, but maybe I'll have a chance to see you.